Hello, my name is Shivam and welcome to my channel, and today we are going to discuss about MCP versus REST API. So we have seen in last couple of years that large language models are very useful when we connect them to external data sources or some services with the help of tools. So previously we were doing all this remote fetch using the REST APIs until in 2024 Anthropic launched open standard protocol, that is Model Context Protocol, that changed how we connect the LLMs with the external services to fetch any remote information. And now MCP is widely used in the AI application when we connect with the large language model. So the question comes, is the REST API being replaced by the MCP? We will find out in this video. So what is MCP? So whenever we talk about MCP, we get a common example of USB-C ports. USB-C port has changed the way how we connect our devices to any other devices. This is one of the example. If we have USB-C supportable on our laptop, then any other device, whether it's your phone, speaker or a smartwatch, can be connected to this USB-C, considering those devices also have the USB-C compatibility. In this way, we can connect any device to other device without making any external changes or configuration changes. It's just a plug and play and both devices can be connected. In similar way, we have the MCP. So there is a MCP client that want to fetch any information from MCP server, which is either a Gmail, Google Cloud, any third-party database services, or connect to any third-party services. So there is a standard protocol MCP in between them, so they can both communicate and exchange messages with each other. If you are interested in building your own MCP from scratch via code, then I have created this video. You can watch this where I explain what is MCP step by step, its advantage, and how to create your own MCP from scratch. So in MCP there are three major components. First is MCP Host. MCP Host is the actual AI application that you are using, and this AI application is connected to the large language model. So whenever the large language model needs some information from a tool, it sends that information to the MCP host, and MCP host pass this information to the MCP client. So one MCP host can establish multiple MCP clients. That means one MCP client can connect to external database services. Second MCP client can connect to any third-party services like Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services. And third MCP client can connect to your local PC to perform some read-write operations. And then there is an external and remote MCP servers are running. These MCP servers' responsibility is to communicate with the MCP client, and when MCP client wants some specific information, such as it wants the latest order and the payment details with this respective user ID, then the only task of MCP server is to fetch it and return back to the MCP client. After that, how to process that information and how to show that information on the UI or in the file, it's the responsibility of MCP host. The big point here is that MCP client and MCP server doesn't have to know each other. That means any changes I make in the MCP servers are independent and isolate. So whenever a communication is established by MCP host, MCP clients fetch the latest information, not the execution, but the latest information what this MCP server can do. Now what is REST API? So we are a developer. We already have used REST API hundreds of times in our applications. So REST API simply is a REST API client, that is our application where we are consuming a HTTP request, and it sends the request in terms of get, post, put, delete method, and then there is an endpoint. Suppose get order details, get user by ID, and such endpoints are available which performs a single operation each time. They accept a fixed amount of parameters and they return a fixed amount of JSON. And these resources are stored on the server. It can be a database information or a file to download or image to download or a video to stream. So it might seem that they both are doing the same task. So you might think, why do we need two things to do the same task? MCP was explicitly designed for LLM application and AI agents. And REST API is not specifically created for AI and LLMs. So REST APIs are general purpose, that if any old technology or new technology that in future will come, REST API is compatible to every other tech and they can use to fetch any information. But the job of MCP is just not to execute something on the server, it can also execute on the local end. Second is dynamic self-discovery. Client can ask server what they offer at runtime. REST API static definition, developers must actually update code for API changes. Suppose I have an endpoint and the backend developer changes the endpoint and their parameters and their response. So backend developer has to tell the frontend developer that these are the new changes of the endpoints, and frontend developer had to make the changes in code on the frontend and deploy it again. So while in the MCP server first sends the information about what it can provide. It doesn't execute, it just tell instead of 2 parameters I have 3 parameters, and instead of JSON array I am going to send a JSON object in return. So that information is pre-sent and set to LLM. So now LLM can set more parameters and expect a JSON object in return. And for all this transaction, no code changes has been needed on the MCP host or MCP client side, because all the information exchange and communication is with the natural languages, not just JSON object. JSON object is just a context, but the actual communication that this is the endpoint, instead of 2 parameters I have 3 or 4 parameters, is being set in the natural language. Hence it's dynamic. So if MCP server changes anything on their end, they have to just change the information, that is the prompt in the MCP server, and MCP client and MCP host will automatically know what are the new changes and they will work according to that. No changes are required in the MCP client and MCP host. Standardization. Every MCP server speaks exact same protocol. Every communication is held with the help of JSON RPC 2.0. So we don't have to worry about whether it's a read information or a put information or delete informations. The information is being sent to the MCP server. After that, it's the responsibility of the MCP server how to handle it. Any changes in MCP server is not affecting the MCP client. Unique implementation. Each REST API is completely unique. So here it means that each REST API is different. Suppose if you want to fetch some information, you want to use get HTTP request. If you want to send or update some information, you have to set put or patch method as an HTTP code in the client side. Hence each endpoint is unique. If I change a post method into a patch method, then we have to change the code on both sides. REST API are the abstraction layer to fetch some internal information and then send, and that's it. The job of the REST API is done. The goal of MCP is to provide a context to the LLM to perform some actions, fetched and sent to the LLM. So you can also say that REST API is a single endpoint which fetches only a single information, while MCP is a collection of REST APIs. That is, it is a group of REST APIs. And to fetch the information, MCP can decide whether it has to trigger 1 or 2 REST APIs or 3 REST APIs, depends upon the question asked by the LLM. So the question comes, will REST API get replaced by the MCP? And that's how you know that REST APIs are the major and important component in any MCP. If you are using MCP of GitHub Actions or Firebase, a bunch of REST APIs are being executed behind the scene. So MCP provides an AI-friendly interface over these REST APIs. And that's how MCP makes a smart AI agents. Let me know how you like this video. If you want more videos on AI, comment below, subscribe this channel. See you in the next video. Till then, keep learning.